Okay guys, this is going to be a quick video elaborating on continuing on what we talked about in the last QBasic lesson involving modules. The last QBasic lesson we talked about subroutines and how subroutines are essentially a smaller program within the program. They're a good way to break your program up into smaller pieces, more manageable pieces, especially when you have a really complex program. You want to break it down into sections. That allows you to have a better organization of your program so you can work on individual pieces, as well as if you have multiple people working on a program, you can say, okay, this person's going to work on this module, this person's going to work on this module, or this subroutine. So last lesson I mentioned that we would also be talking about another form of modularization called functions. In QBasic, they're called functions. Their functions are a lot like subroutines, but there's one key difference. The key difference is that a function actually returns a value, whereas a subroutine essentially just executes a program. So let me show you what I mean. I have, actually before I show you kind of the difference between a subroutine and a function, let's walk through a basic example of a function. Just let me show you how to set it up in QBasic, how to call it, and sort of how it works. So the first thing I'm going to do, and this is the way I do it, you can also just type all of this out by hand if you want. But just like with subroutines, I like to go to the edit menu and just click on new function. It works the same as when you choose new sub for a new subroutine. But when you click on new function, it asks you to give the function a name. So I'm going to create a new function called cube. So when I do that, it creates a new function called cube. So we have the function keyword and then the name of our function, and then we also have to end it with an end-function command. So inside of the function and the end functions, this is where we can actually do program statements to do some particular, it could be arithmetic or it could be any number of things, but the key thing is at the end of this function we want to return a value. So in this particular function, the idea is that I'm going to be able to pass a number into this function, and I'm going to take that number and cube it or multiply it by itself 3 times. So the first thing I want to do is, just like with subroutines, remember that we have parameters and we have arguments. So when we set up our function or subroutine, we can give it parameters. So parameters are basically variables or values that are then going to be used within the function or the subroutine. Arguments are what you call the variables that you pass into the parameters, and we'll talk about an argument here in a second when we actually call this function. But for now, we're going to set up the parameters for this function. So in parentheses, I'm just going to put a basic integer parameter called val1. Of course, we could also do a string, and we could put a $sign to signify that it's a string, but I want an integer. You can also say as integer here. Either one will work, but QBasic knows by default if I don't put any sort of value in there or I don't have a $sign for a string, it's just going to assume that this is an integer. So I have a parameter set up called val1 as an integer variable. So at this point, I can pass an argument into the val1 parameter, and then I can take that value and do whatever I want to with it. I can multiply it, divide it, subtract it, add it, do whatever I need to do within this function. In this particular case, very simple, I just want to cube this number. So the key here is when you want to return a value from the function, you have to put the function name in and then set that function name equal to something. So the value that's going to be returned from this function is going to be the value cube. So if I said something like test equals val1 times val1 times val1, that's really not going to do anything. It's not. I'm not actually returning a value. In order to really return a value, you have to actually set the function name equal to something. Now I could say test equals val1 times val1 times val1, but then eventually I would need to say cube equals test, to where I set the function name equal to something, and that is actually going to return this value to the rest of the program whenever I call the function. Hopefully that makes sense. So for now, all we really need to do is say cube equals val1 times val1 times val1. Okay, so from here we have our function set up. Now we need to call it. So let's say I want to get an input from the user where they actually give me a number to cube. So I'm going to say input, enter a number to cube, and I can say I can store that in a variable called cube val. Okay, so I have in a variable called cube val that I'm storing this number in. Now I want to call my function. So I can simply just say print cube. Now, you can see before I put anything in here, it says incorrect number of arguments passed to the function on current line. So the QBasic editor here knows that there is one parameter in the cube function. So it is going to force me to pass an argument to this parameter. Now, I can call the argument whatever I want. I can call it test. I can call it anything. As long as, just like with subroutines, this data type is the same as this data type. So they both have to be integers. I can't do a string here. And as you can see, it says number required for function on current line. So it knows that the parameter for the function cube is an integer. Therefore, the argument that I pass has to be an integer. Okay. So in our case, though, we have a specific value we want to pass into this function, and it's called cube val. So cube val, whatever number gets put in from the user, is going to get passed into this function via this function call right here. We're going to pass whatever the value is into this val1 parameter, and then we're going to multiply it by itself 3 times to get the cube value of that number. So let's run it really quickly. Okay, so enter a number to cube, so we can do 3 as an example. And that's going to give us 3 times 3 times 3 is 27. So that is the cube of 3. So our program is working just fine. So then we could have any other number of statements within our program and call this function as many times as we wanted to. Anytime we needed to cube a number for some reason, we could pass a value into this function. You could also just say 6. You could put a value of 6 in here. Now, the input statement is going to be meaningless. We're going to store a value into cube val, but it's not actually going to be used. But let's go ahead and run this. It should give us the cube of 6. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to put a 3 in here again. But this time I don't think it's going to give us 27. It's going to give us 216. Okay? So that's the cube of 6. So as you can see, you can pass any sort of, as long as it's an integer, you can pass a value into this, pass an argument into this function. It gets passed to the parameter, and then code is executed within this function and is returned, and then you return a value using the function name. Okay? So that is, those are functions, very basic. A lot like subroutines. The key is you return a value. So let's look really quickly at another program. I've already written it out, so I don't waste your time typing it out here. Where we can kind of see the difference between a function and a subroutine. So this particular program, it's going to prompt the user to enter 3 values and store them in X, Y, and Z. Then we have 2 different calls here. The first one, we're going to say the function the highest value is. So this is a function call, highest value X, Y, Z. The second call is where we're actually going to call a subroutine called sub high val. Okay. For both of these, we're passing in the input values X, Y, Z as arguments. Now, if you go down here, and again, we can go to View Subs, and we can see we have a subroutine and a function. So if we look at the subroutine first, you can see right here we have 3 values, first, second, third, and they've all been defined as integer. So 3 different values. We have some if logic. First we set the first number, whatever the first number is, so in our case it's going to be x. We set x equal to high value, and then we say if high value is less than the second number, then high value equals second. Otherwise, if high value is less than third, then high value equals third, and eventually it prints what the highest value is, whatever the high value turns out to be. Okay? Now, if we look at our function, similar logic, we pass in a first, second, and third. We do our same if logic to determine what the highest value is. But notice the difference here at the end. We're not doing a print statement and then printing the highest value. We're actually returning that high value. And with using the function name, highest value, where's the function name go? Right there, highest value. So we set highest value equal to high value. So in the function, we're returning a number. And then up here in our code, we do our print statement here, and then we just call the function. In the subroutine does not return anything. A subroutine actually executes just like a regular program. So in the subroutine, we actually are printing the value here inside the subroutine. Okay? Hopefully you guys can see the difference. So first one, again, we're just calling the function, it's returning a value. So it's just we're going to say print the highest value is, and then this call right here is going to return a number. In this one, we call the subroutine, and as part of the subroutine, we do the print function. So let's go ahead and run this guy. So if I enter 3 values, 1, 2, and 3, it should do 2 calls. It should print the number 3 twice. The first one should say function the highest value is 3. The second one should say the highest value is 3. So this first line or second line was created using a function. The second one was created using the subroutine. So they both basically do the same basic thing, except again, the key difference is the function just returns a value. The subroutine does not return a value. It just it executes just like a regular program. Okay, it's like a program within our program. Okay. All right. So hopefully that makes sense. I'm going to give you another homework this week, just involving functions. So hopefully this makes sense. As always, email me if you have any issues or any questions on functions or subroutines or any other topic. Okay, that's it. Bye.